Hi, this is PatZi with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And we have a great story today. My guest has written a debut novel, and everybody knows that I just love when authors come out with a new novel, and especially when it's their first novel, because Jerez, you've done it. My goodness, this is amazing.
Thank you, PatZi. Thank you so much for having me here today.
I had you on my radio program, and I said to myself after when I finished, I said, "Oh my gosh, I have to really spread the word here because this book is so much fun. It is such a great read, and I wanted to make sure that I had you here right away so that I could tell people about it and that you can tell people how you got to this point because not many debut authors get well, let's just say you have made a splash, a big splash, and especially when you make a splash with one of the best writers, best-selling writers in the world, and that is Robert Dugoni. Now, Robert
Oh
was
my
my guest for my special, very special anniversary program, and we were talking about his books and, of course, The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell. And he had so many nice things to say about you, and this is just wonderful. So I'm just going to read it for everybody. Enchanting novel At the Island's Edge is a captivating and poignant debut about a young mother's struggle to heal from the scars of war following her deployment in Iraq as a U.S. Army medic. Deeply moving prose dives into the realities of war for women in combat, the complexities of serving while balancing motherhood, and the sacrifices made. This heartwarming novel captures the beauty of Puerto Rico's culture and leaves us wanting more. And that is from Robert Dugoni. And when Robert Dugoni says it is captivating, when he says it's deeply moving, it is deeply moving. And boy, oh boy, when he says it's heartwarming, it's heartwarming. So, with that kind of praise, that is pretty spectacular. Now,
I agree.
now explain why this is particularly relevant for this wonderful book, At the Island's Edge, because you have some connection with this.
I do. And it is so surreal for me to be here following his interview, to have this connection that I still can't quite explain. But At the Island's Edge was originally inspired when I had first read The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell in January of 2022. So I read that novel and I was captivated and enchanted by his book and the character of Sam, especially Sam as a little boy. And I think Sam just stayed with me and it began to evolve into a story that I had in my own mind, who eventually became Teo, my protagonist Lena's son. He's a 9-year-old boy who struggles with disability, and I felt that Teo was wanting to tell me the story about his mom. And so when I was about 100 pages into the novel, I randomly met Robert Dugoni, at a New York writers conference. I had no idea he'd be there, and I told him about the novel that I was writing that he had inspired, and he very graciously signed my journal and encouraged me to keep on writing and keep on listening to that little voice and that little boy. And as fate would have it, I was so excited that he had signed my novel, and I think gave me this little stroke of magic in the words. But about, I would say, 18 months later, I sold that novel, and I sold it to the same publisher who had published The Extraordinary Life of Sam Howell. And that could have been the end of the story. But then when I saw him now at the same New York conference 2 years later, and I told him, I reminded him of when he first signed my journal. I told him that I had sold the novel to his same publisher. He very graciously offered to read and endorse the book. And this is a prolific writer with a global following who I'm sure has a huge list of books and that he's planning to read. But he did read it and it was inspired by his. And now Bob's endorsement is the front and center when you first open my book. And so I'm just incredibly indebted to his kindness and selflessness. And I believe that this book is just a little seed of inspiration that came from his. So, very excited to see that he was on the show just recently as well.
This is part of what I call the golden threads that connect me to authors. I find these connections where authors are connected in an inexplicable way. Something like this, you meet an author and then he helps you. And that's one of the great things about authors. They do like to help. When they're successful, they're still out there helping younger authors, new authors. And there's a generosity of spirit that you find among authors. I love it. And going to conventions, getting this opportunity to meet is so important because you never know what it's going to lead to. As you said, when he is a global best-selling author, but yet all of these little connections, him with Sam Hell, his connection where Sam Hell actually took over as he was writing his book. The boy took over. And in your case, the same thing. So this is what is so beautiful. I think these connections are remarkable and blessed. It's this a blessing that we get sometimes. And there are a lot of books out there, but I can tell you if Bob is going to recommend a book, it's good. Of course, he has an eye for a great writing. He himself now is teaching. This is what he loves to do. It's nice when you're very famous, but if you still are giving, and that's what he does.
Yeah, and I'm actually very excited because I recently did an interview with Stephen James for the Story Blender and found out that he and Stephen James, so Bob and Stephen, do a writer's retreat in Nashville. And Stephen very graciously invited me to attend this year. If all things work out, I may very possibly be working again with the two of them, with Bob and Steve, on my new novel, which I'm currently working on. So that thread just continues to unfold in my life, and I am incredibly thankful. I did not plan for it to work out this way, but all roads are leading in that direction for the end of the year. And I am so excited to work with both authors. The caliber of work that they do is just on another level.
It is, and it is magical, really. It is magical. That's not the only thing that happened to you. Getting an endorsement from Robert Dugoni is a great thing, but you've gotten other things. And I love that you got a Booklist starred review.
Yes,
Um,
thank you.
that's another one where they're saying At the Island's Edge is an unflinching look at the choices made during war, PTSD, alcoholism, and the pure power of a support system. This book is not just about the very realistic pains of Army life, but also about healing and incredible empathy in the face of unfathomable suffering. Most debut novels don't get a start review right out of the gate. This is really remarkable.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I keep pinching myself every day to remind myself that this is really happening, that these dreams, these lifelong dreams, are coming to reality. We just got another review by the Midwest Book Review that left me stunned in its praise. And yeah, it's just incredible. There has been a lot of magic associated with this novel. I shared a story yesterday about the famous author Elizabeth Gilbert. I'm sure you're familiar of Eat, Pray, Love. I actually had the opportunity to meet her when I was just going on submission. And I was not on submission for very long. It was just a few days, actually, which is a little unheard of. But I had this opportunity, this very rare opportunity, where I was chosen from the very back of a room of 300 women at a retreat. And she pulled me up on stage. It was her and Dr. Terai Trent. And I shared a little bit about my story. And I finished it by saying, I am now on stage with one of this amazing authors that has inspired me for so long. And I'm on submission for my first novel. And she gave me a hug and she whispered, "This is finished." And I was stunned, speechless. And then she reached in her pocket as I was walking off the stage. She called me back. She hands me this little piece of turquoise from her pocket. And she said, I want you to have this. It's a piece of the sky because for you, the sky is the limit. And I still almost get very choked up just thinking about that moment because I walked off the stage stunned about what had just happened with Elizabeth Gilbert, of all authors. And a few days later, I left that retreat on Sunday. And on Thursday, my agent had called me to let me know that we had a publisher interested. Lake Union was interested in the book. And so I feel like that was another example where Liz just gave me a little bit of magic for this book.
There is something magical in this book, I will tell you. There is something. You touch hearts with this book. It is a very special read. And yeah, as I said, I knew it from the minute I read it because I get books well in advance, months in advance. And the minute I read it, I said, "Oh my goodness, this is a real talent." And oh, I just there's so many wonderful things about this book. So we'll get into that. But I do also want to mention that one of the things that I talked to Robert Dugoni about was the Nashville event. So I'm gonna
Oh,
a little while after this, I'm gonna put a little screen up about that. So we'll do that too. But
perfect.
let's we've talked about it, and I wanted to show one thing too. As you see in I put in the background a photo of Puerto Rico. And because Puerto Rico plays a very big part in the story, it's like another character. For anybody who reads this book, they're going to feel like they are in Puerto Rico. You bring it to life. I love when a location becomes part of the book. So tell us about this book. What
Oh,
do you want to
thank
tell
you.
people?
Well, I had the opportunity and the pleasure of living in Puerto Rico or working there three different times as an adult. The very first time I ever touched the shores of the island, I was on my very first cruise. My husband had just come home from Iraq from a 15-month deployment. We took this vacation, and San Juan was our first stop, the capital of Puerto Rico. And I remember it was January of 2008. Yes, January of 2008. We were walking the streets of Old San Juan, and I whispered, I could live here. It's so beautiful. I had this connection to the island, it was very strong. And coincidentally enough, in October of that same year, so about 9 months later, I was offered a job and I had packed my things and I was moving to the island to begin work at a manufacturing facility in Dorado. And so that began this magical, and I know I've used the word magic a lot, but I just don't know what other word can really aptly describe some of these coincidences that have happened. But I lived there for 3 years, fell in love with the island, with the culture, with the people. My mother is half Puerto Rican, so obviously I had familiarity with the culture, but living on the island and immersing myself to that extent was different. And it was so special. And then because my husband was active duty after 3 years, we had to move elsewhere. I had another opportunity to move back in 2016. So I went and lived on the island for a year. And then again, we had to relocate. So in 2017, a year later, we moved to Ohio. And then my last stint in 2020, I was leading the operations for a law firm on the island. And so I was spending 1 week in Puerto Rico and 1 week in the US. And I was doing that for an entirety of a year. So I felt comfortable that I could capture the essence and the spirit of the island. And I had such a profound sense of gratitude and appreciation for my experiences there that as I was thinking about my story and Lena's journey and asking myself, like, what would be the catalyst for this character? Where can I lead her in a way that is going to have a lot of tension, a lot of mixed emotions, but at the end of the day is everything that she needed and more. It's going to be her source of healing. And the idea of Puerto Rico just continued to present itself. And I thought, I'm not going to fight that. I'm going to lean in and pour all of that emotionality that I have about the island into the novel. And so that's what I did.
You certainly did. And one of the things, why don't you explain how you got in the military? Because this, of course, once you got in the military, you became familiar with life in the military and with your husband's experience in combat. So you bring all of that into it. So, how did you get into the military?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I was born with a sense of patriotism because I don't have a strong military background in my family. That was not something I had any exposure to. But growing up in El Paso, Texas, I did see Fort Bliss, and we would in the supermarkets, you would see the soldiers that were stationed at Fort Bliss. And I remember being fascinated by them. And then I watched Top Gun as a kid, and I was just dying to be Tom Cruise in a fighter jet. I had all these dreams of grandeur. And so these like seeds that started very young never went away. And so I ended up going to college in El Paso. I earned my degree in accounting. And I knew when it was time to sit for the CPA, I had my degree. I was at a crossroads and I just wasn't as excited about taking the CPA exam as I was just going for it. It was 3 years past 9/11. So the sense of American patriotism, the fight for freedom was very strong still in the community, in my own heart. And so finally, now with a college degree, I said, I'm just going to go for it. And I remember the recruiters telling me that I had less than 10% chance of being picked for OCS, the Officer Candidate School, because I had not done ROTC. I had no military background at all. And I said, 10%, I'll take those odds. And so I went for it. And I was very fortunate that I made under the 10% and I got picked up for OCS. And so I shipped out to basic training in June of 2005. And I really just spent the next year in training between basic training, OCS, the basic officer leadership course, and then what they now call Bullock 2, which was OBC, the officer basic course that teaches you about your actual job. And then, of all the places on the planet, I really wanted to see the world. I was in the Army, I was excited to do all these things. They stationed me right back home at Fort Bliss in El Paso. So I did my 3 years of active duty in El Paso, and then I was stationed at Fort Buchanan as a reservist once I got that job in Puerto Rico. And so being able to serve in Fort Buchanan was very interesting, very unique to see these two cultures clash and combine into the Army culture on the island. And I wanted to make sure I captured that sentiment in the book as well.
You do. And of course, in the book, your main character, Lena, is a medic. So you put her
Yes.
right there in the action. And then let's just put it this way, you give her a lot of problems. Poor Lena.
Yes, it's a good training and tool as a writer. They say make sure you are very unkind and grueling to your protagonist. It makes for an interesting story. I made sure
You,
to do that.
mission accomplished. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way. Mission accomplished because you give Lena so many problems. And but right from the beginning, we all care about her. And this is wonderful. Now, as you said, you're not a medic and you didn't go into combat, but having a husband who has, so you heard some things I'm sure that have been pretty horrific over the years. So
Yes.
explain how, as when you first started, you had an idea, and you did you right away you were going to make her a medic, and did you how much that moment that it just popped into your head? This is what the exciting thing about being an author, isn't it? Something just happens to you one day, and well, she's born, she's alive, as far as your readers are concerned.
Yeah, I think it started with Teo. So I knew that Teo was telling me a story about his mom and that his mom was in the army. And so looking at, in some ways, my experience, I was a mother while I was in service. When I first joined, I had two daughters. And then by the time I was in my first duty station, I had three daughters. So I found out I was pregnant with my third daughter shortly after arriving at my first duty station. So it was very interesting for me to look at the perspective from the child's eyes. And that got me curious about Lena and about the story that I wanted to tell. And then one day I woke up, and this is very, some people will say cliche, but it's very real that there's so many things that are happening in our brains while we're asleep that creative people tend to wake up, or they're in that transition from waking up and they get these ideas. And so one morning for me, the idea was, what would it be like for a mother on the battlefield to be forced to take the life of a young person who reminds her so much of her child? Just that one question. So from there, it was like I grabbed it, I wrote it down, and then I let it marinate. And as that question and that idea began to marinate, I thought about the cultural implications if the mother in uniform was also Latina, understanding that for me as a Latina, what life and motherhood and war represent culturally. So I was thinking about those complexities and the idea that she would be a medic. So I was not a medic in the army. I was a signal officer, which I realize not everybody knows what that means. And that's actually like communications, radios, information technology. My field was very technical. But for Lena, as a healer and as a medic, the idea of saving lives is at the forefront of her mind at all times. And so to be trained and called to heal and save, and then be forced to take a life on the battlefield to protect the lives of the men and women that are with her in her convoy, I just thought, what great dynamics and tension and paradox ideas to think through. And that's what books and stories are, the best kinds, are supposed to be able to do, right? Is really make us look at all different sides of something and entertain us while they're doing it. So I just had this feeling that I was onto something. And once I felt that, I couldn't let it go. It wouldn't let me go until I sat down and just started drafting that scene. And that's actually where we start in the book.
Yes. And then, as I said, you give her so much to deal with. There is so much to deal with. But while all of that is happening, you're introducing other characters and you're introducing us to the island. And all that goes into it, the way you describe the island, the way you describe the food, which I think everyone will get a kick out of that, and the people and the goodness of so many of the people and the warmth. I think that comes across in your writing.
Thank you. Yeah, I am truly passionate about storytelling. Stories have been integral in my entire life. I cannot remember a time in my existence that I have memories that there wasn't a book in my hand, a book that I was reading from the time I was very little. I was reading chapter books way before my friends to today. Today, I've got a book on Audible, a book on my Kindle, physical books at every place where I sit in my house. There's a book there waiting. And so I really went after this because I am so passionate about storytelling and I wanted it to be good storytelling. I have that focus on the reader. And I know there's two ways to look at this, and people will say, write the book that you want to write. That is, I don't do that. I am obsessively focused on the reader experience because I love being a reader. And I know how rewarding that experience is with a good book. So while I don't have the answer for every reader, I do, in general, just try to create moments and scenarios and a storyline that will take you on an escape. And Puerto Rico lends itself to that very easily. It's a beautiful tropical island with some of the most loving people, and the food is incredible. And I ate way too much of it when I was there. And so it really lended itself easily to take all of those experiences and put it on the page. But a book where everything is wonderful tends to not be quite so interesting or engaging. And so I had to balance all these amazing things with the reality of the emotional turmoils of war, which I feel that I did have a strong understanding of from my time in service, and the fact that we were in two wars while I was serving. So, whether it was through my relationships with my soldiers, my brothers and sisters in arms, people that were on my left and right, my husband who deployed 4 times in the his 20 years of service to Iraq, to Afghanistan, to Kuwait. So I really understood a lot of the challenges that service members were dealing with, and I knew what it was to be a mother in uniform, where there was a constant threat of having to make the hardest choice in the world, which is what you signed up for when you raised your right hand and giving your life for your country, and the responsibilities of motherhood. And I have so much respect for the women that have served, that understand that dynamic, and they live with it on a daily basis, and they still say yes, and they still raise their right hand, and they still go and serve. And I just really wanted to honor them in this book.
And you do, and because you're tackling very difficult subjects. And we've heard of PTSD among the men, but it's rare that we hear about the PTSD that the women who serve in combat zones. They, just like they did in World War II and Korean War, Vietnam, the women, somehow people always think the woman is going to be strong. She can deal with that kind of stuff. Somehow stronger than a man. It's strange. And we've seen that, of course, with Christine Hanna and her book, where we understand that women, on top of everything else that they have to deal with, they almost have to hide their PTSD. They have to, I'm sure she's the one who says to other people, well, this patient should see somebody about their PTSD. She doesn't want to say, I should see somebody about my PTSD.
That's right. In fact, that's such a good point. Not only are they forced to hide it, they often hide it from themselves. They don't want to admit. And especially so, I really found this interesting, and the timing worked out so beautifully that I was going on submission when I found out that Kristen Hanna's book was coming out 6 months later in February. And when I found out what her book was about, there was mixed feelings. I was scared because somebody like Kristen Hanna is a household name, and I thought, oh no, she's writing the story first. And then the more I learned about it, the more I thought this is wonderful because she is paving a path, and that's exactly what she did. And so I don't want to speak for her. Obviously, I have never spoken with Kristen Hanna, but I did read her beautiful book. And I think that obviously she was captivated by the complexities of women battling wartime realities. And I think that those complexities are present because our minds are different from our male counterparts. And that doesn't take away from the male experience and their suffering, because I have experienced that. I've seen what they go through, and it breaks my heart. But our minds are different. And oftentimes there is an expectation for women when they return back from the battlefields to pick up exactly where they left off. And they have children that are counting on them. Like in Lena's case, not only does she have a child, but she has a child with special needs. And that is a reality for so many women in service, that they have to come back and they need to handle their responsibilities, because if they don't, who else is going to do it? And you have these innocent children that are counting on them, that have missed them, that need them. And so there's not a lot of time and a lot of room for these women to deal with the realities of their experiences. And so it begins to affect them in ways that they don't even see coming, until in some cases the situation is dire.
Christine Hanna's book, of course, she's been a guest on my program and we talked about the women. I love that book. I love the way that she approached it. Also, understanding that women have to take so much on their shoulders. And just like in the everyday life of a mother, you have to be the calm one, you have to be the one who can handle things. And when you have all of these images, particularly for women who have been in combat, they have these images. And for a medic, they see horrific things. I know emergency room doctors who have given up after years of being in the emergency room and they still can't get the images out of their heads. So there are doctors and there are nurses who turn to drugs or turn to alcohol to try to blunt it. But again, sometimes the women are the last ones to ask for help.
Yeah, and that's tends to be the case. And with Lena, that was definitely the case. And I think it was important for me to also show the different sides of PTSD and the different sides of post war, and creating Elijah Montgomery, who is also very integral to the story for many reasons, was important because I don't want readers to think that there's only one face to recovery from wartime experiences. It has so many different faces. And whether it's the service members that Lena comes encounter with, or it's Eli, our Southern gentleman from Charleston, South Carolina, who's living in Puerto Rico, I think I really wanted to give the reader a lot of different options and perspectives on what wartime looks and feels like for different people.
He is a great character. And so we have tension on different levels that you've created, the whole beauty of being an author. You are the god. and, but yet sometimes the characters do take over for you too.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I, like I mentioned, I have three daughters. I didn't have a little boy, and so Teo is purely a creation from my own heart. I had such a blast. I have always wanted to raise a little boy. Now I have two beautiful grandsons, so they have filled a lot of that. But I was surprised at how he came to life, and he really did that on his own. There were lines that he delivered that I'm like, you are such an interesting kid. I don't know where you're coming from, but I really like you. And it was just a wonderful experience to put him on the page. He made me laugh. Very,
I love
very
that.
surreal experience.
I know it is so much fun when a character and I'm working on a book I've been working on forever, but I also have a child character. And when I first her first entry into the to the scene was nothing. She wasn't supposed to be anything. But then once I put words in her mouth, maybe she put the words, she then took over. She steals every page she's on because she's delightful, but she does it herself. I know people think we're crazy when we say that, but it happens. And I think that's exactly what happened to Robert Dugoni when he was writing Sam Hell. Some of Sam Hell, he had experiences that went into it, but somewhere they grow in your heads, and that's the exciting thing. When I tell people that until you actually put your words on paper, which is the joy on paper, and you read them, which is another joy.
Yes.
And then when you see that they start to take over, it's an absolute joy.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's what pulls me to the page time and time again. I've had a lot of people ask me about the writing process. I don't have a structured writing process. I have way too many competing responsibilities right now to do that. But every time that I'm able to just sit at the desk for an hour, I have such joy at the fact that I really don't know what that day's writing is going to be like when it's my first draft. And I just reread a little bit of where I left off, and then I let it flow wherever it goes. And that's the way that it works best, is just to let the characters do what they're going to do. You can edit and polish and clean up and all that stuff later. But the most raw, beautiful story is going to be when you get out of the way and you're just the fingers on the keyboard, or you're just the one holding the pen, but they are coming to life through you and they are letting their story come out on the page.
And with Teo, of course, you could have had just a simple kid waiting for his mom to come home and either having problems in school and being bitter or whatever, but you've given him such a personality. Wow, wow. So, did you have any experience with a child like Teo?
Yeah, not Tourette's syndrome. So we do have a young boy in the family who's been diagnosed with a neurological disorder, and he's not quite 9 years old. But Teo's diagnosis for Tourette's came from Teo. And I know that probably sounds a little hokey pokey, but as
No,
I
that
was picturing
sounds about right to me.
yeah, because I don't have experience, direct experience with Tourette's, but when I was picturing him, his tics were part of his character. I could see him blinking, I could see him sniffing, and I had to go back and do a ton of research because I knew if I was going to do this, I needed to honor the children and the parents who have navigated this condition, and I needed to do it right. And so I watched a ton of videos of kids that were being interviewed on what their experiences were like, kids that were part of different study groups. I did a lot of research on medical journals. I think that's one of the good things about I have my doctorate in international business, so I'm very familiar with scholarly material, even though it can be very dry. But I'm very comfortable reading and researching. And that's what I did with his condition, understanding that if I was going to go there, I needed to get it right.
And also talking to women who were medics.
Oh, yeah.
Where did you get your information on this? Go out there and talk to nurses who had just come back or who were there?
Yeah. So I served with them, and there was a lot of dialogue from reaching back out to them from their time in service. I have some very dear friends that read through the first chapter, the prologue, and gave me their thoughts and their feedback. And I remember when it was all said and done, and I read the prologue to a writers group. It was finished. The book had sold. We were just waiting for pub day. And there was I think she's Navy. She's a Navy vet on the convoy. And she said, it's like I was there all over again. You got every detail right. And I was heartbroken for her. And I was also very honored for her at the same time. Like it was important to me that we did get those details right. But it was hard for me to see her relive her experiences from listening to the prologue. And so that's why it's important for me that with my women vets, read the whole book because there's a great arc and there could be a lot of healing for you in that novel.
I agree. You have to read the whole book to get to get through it. But now you mentioned you sold the book. So we know that it was picked up by Lake Union. How did you go about it when you had the book? How did you get an agent before you got the publisher? Did you get the publisher directly? How did that work for you? Because it's not easy to get a book out there with a major publisher.
Uh,
Union is just, they publish fantastic books. They have a collection of books they've published that are amazing, including Robert Dugoni's Sam Hell. So many wonderful books. So how did you get them? This is in and of itself is amazing for a debut author.
I was very blessed. I went through the query trenches like any other debut author. I had a dream and I did some research and I found out about Query Tracker and the query letter. And I did a few seminars on how to write a strong query. And I had tons of rejections. And this is not a good fit for me. It doesn't match what I'm looking for. I went through at least 50 some agents that some responded, some didn't. But I signed up for the Writing Away Refuge, which they do virtual pitching. So you get a few minutes face to face over the computer with agents that sign up for each of those events. And I just knew when I met who would be my future agent, Katie Reed from the Andrea Hurst and Associates agency, that there was something, a connection there. There was a very strong connection. And she read the book and contacted me and she loved it. But if you hear her tell the story, to her, it was very important, not only the story, but who I was and how would it be like working with me. So I didn't know that aspect of this industry. I was really just being myself, and thank God that worked for me. But I think it's now something that I will share with writers as much as I can. Be humble, be kind, take direction because in that first call with my agent, she had a lot of recommendations on things that she wanted me to think about. And I was really open and receptive to all of them. And so that solidified our relationship that she said, okay, that she's not going to be a nightmare to work with. So let's go ahead and sign her and see how we do. And so I signed in March. We worked for 6 months on some edits for the manuscript before we agreed it was ready. And she had told me from the very beginning, this feels like a Lake Union novel. So I think there's obviously some skill on the agent side that they understand how to match a book and an author to the right editor and the right publishing house. And so her wheels were already spinning about who at Lake Union would like to see this. And I think that she picked well because when we sent it out to multiple publishers, but Lake Union was the first to come back, and the editor read the manuscript over the weekend. I think she was even on vacation when she got Katie's email, and she read it while she was on vacation over the weekend. And she came back before anyone else. And so I've always trusted that momentum and that flow. And we didn't waste a lot of time trying to go on auction or anything like that. I just knew the way that this was moving and the flow that was happening between her and my agent, Katie, and Lake Union, this was the right call. And it was Lake Union. It was a huge honor to have them this excited about the book. And I'm so thankful that we chose them.
You chose right because they really are the best in this type of book. Absolutely the best. And I've always heard from everybody who's dealing with them the support they give an author, especially the support they give to a new author, because it's not easy. And what you said that you authors, oh, I have had so many stories of people who have written their books, and sometimes from NaNoWriMo, or they've been working on their books, and they come to me and they ask my advice, like, how do I get my book published? And I, because I talk to a lot of writers groups, and I used to do all of that, especially before the pandemic. I do like a writers group every week. One guy, he came to me, said, I finished my book and I've sent out my query letters, and would you have a look at it? Because I haven't heard anything. And he hadn't even gotten rejections. So I read his query letter. And the beginning was nice. He wrote about himself, he wrote about the book. He had gotten that far in learning how to write. His last sentence was, and I think it's perfect, and I don't want anything changed.
Yeah. No, not a good way to end it.
I asked him, did you send this out? Because he was a local author. And I said, why didn't you ask me before you sent it out? You could ask me. Because he had been listening to my program. And partly he was inspired to continue writing because he heard all the authors on my radio program. I said, no, you have to redo it, but don't send it to the same people again.
No.
You don't ever want them to know. Because
No.
you have to, because it's not perfect the first time. And,
Never.
and any suggestion an agent gives you is a smart suggestion. Sometimes new people coming to writing don't understand that the job of an agent is to make you successful.
Right.
Because if you're successful, they're successful. And then when an editor criticizes, and we will use that word, they do criticize, they're gentle about it usually.
Sure.
But those are like real suggestions that you should be following.
I completely agree. And my developmental edit process with Lake Union was extremely rigorous. We did a lot of editing and rewriting and adding. And I think the book is as strong as it is because of the combined guidance from the agent and from my developmental editor, Tiffany Yates Martin. She was on another level, and she's recognized as one of the industry best. And I was so lucky to work with her. I want to work with her every time if I can, but it was very intense. A lot of rewrites.
I told this guy, I said, even Ernest Hemingway had an editor.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah. So it's something to learn, but it's just of course you did everything right, and it's so nice
Thank
that you're
you.
working on the new book.
Yes. Well, I
And
just
I
got back from Cuba last week. I was doing some research on the island, and so I am super excited about this new project as well.
and it's funny you say you're a grandmother, and I was thinking, to me, I was thinking you're like maybe 32, 33.
Oh,
So,
it's those nut genes.
but I'm still calling you a young debut author.
Thank you. I'll take it.
It is really, I think, a great accomplishment, something to be really proud of. And I've said to some other people in the past, and it's turned out to be true, that you also write very cinematically.
Thank you.
When I'm reading a book, and if I'm like into page 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there, if I've started seeing it as a movie in my head, then that's a good sign because I visualize it. And when I start forgetting I'm reading a book and I'm like in the story, which happened here, I worked in Hollywood. I adapted several books for film, and I had nothing to work with. They were terrible books. My script was 1,000 times better than the books, but I had that experience of trying to just find a few golden nuggets in a horrible book. But the screenwriter who gets your book is going to say, "Oh my gosh, she's done too much. She's given us too much to work with. What are we going to do?"
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I am praying. I have in my heart maybe I can get J-Lo's New Eurekan Productions attention because I know how much she loves the island.
Yeah,
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed. This is a perfect for her production company. If she doesn't take it, she's crazy. You have to find somebody else because of all the books I've read recently, I can tell you this one, it'd be a joy. The screenwriter who gets this book is going to say, "Oh, God, I am so blessed. I'm so blessed. I have this beautiful book to work with. Wonderful characters. It's not just Elijah. It's not just Lena. It's not just Teo. But there's all these other characters that you built and wrapped into the story who come alive.
Thank you.
It's going to happen. I'm sure it's going to happen.
Oh,
I thought it
PatZi.
was going to happen to a 32-year-old. If you're a little bit older, that's okay.
That's okay. I'll take it at this stage of my life too. I needed all those experiences over all those years to be able to write now. So,
Yeah. And that is true. We put everything that we know within us, and it comes out when we're writing. I do get a lot of books from people who are just graduating from MFA courses, but so often they don't have depth because they haven't lived. They haven't done other
right.
jobs other than going to college, which is not all that challenging. They don't challenge college students anymore. In the old days, they used to make you learn Latin and take all sorts of other subjects, even if it wasn't your main thing. They'd still make
Wow.
you take chemistry. They still make you take,
Uh,
yeah, and you learn. That was a good experience. But
yeah.
nowadays, you go to college and you can take silly classes to fill in. Why you want to pay for classes that are just fill ins? I don't know.
I don't know. That was not my experience.
Yeah, I know. It was more rigorous. You actually had to study a subject that you were not interested in.
Yeah.
Who cared about it? But then later on in life, you say to yourself, "Oh boy, I'm glad I took that chemistry class."
Yep.
I love this kind of success. It's
Thank
it comes. People don't realize it comes through years and years of hard work, but then it looks so easy when it does come.
Yeah. No, this was my third try. So I have two books gathering dust in the drawers exactly where they belong. But I wasn't going to give up until I knew I got it right, that I was telling the story I really wanted to tell, not from my head, but from my heart. And that was this novel. And it's now taught me so that I can write more like this.
Okay, let's look at Robert Dugoni one more time. I want people to realize that Bob doesn't say this to everybody. Anybody who's read his work and knows his work over the years, and I think I was reading him from the day he first published. When he says things like captivating and poignant and heartwarming, he means it. And so let's just give a special thank you to him.
Yes, thanks, Bob. I don't know where I'd be on this journey without you.
I'm going to send this link to him so that he can see how grateful you are, and of course, how
Yes.
grateful I am that he did it for you
Yes.
because I get this book.
Thank you, PatZi. I am so blessed to have people like you, people like Bob, come across this path and change my life.
It's a great book. It's great. It's wonderful. And of course, you'll be back when you have the next book out.
Yes.
Unless, now this is something, if you get optioned, particularly if you get optioned by JLo, you have to promise to come back on Joy on Paper and make the announcement. Because I don't get a
That is,
lot of breaking news. It would be really nice. I could Joy on Paper Live, breaking news. Sure.
that is a promise.
That's what I need. That's what I need because it would be so much fun. It would be really so much fun to have you back. And yeah, I think I'm gonna send this link to JLo too. I
Oh
still
my goodness. You're going to
I
make
just
me
realized
cry.
I still know a few people. It's just this is just too exciting. This is exciting.
Thank you, PatZi. Thank you so much.
Okay, and I'm so happy that it's just after my 10th anniversary of.
Congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. And it's a double anniversary. 10th year on the radio, first year on YouTube. And it is such a joy. And I love the YouTube because now I can see you. When you were on the radio, I knew, well, I thought she sounds so young and beautiful. And then I get you here and
Oh,
you look so young and beautiful. So it works out
oh,
very
so
nicely.
sweet. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you. And everybody get this book. You will love it. It's a great read. That's what I'm telling you. Okay. And you want to read it before, what I love. This is something I tell everybody. When you read a book like this and then you start to think, who is going to play the lead? So people can start imagining who they should have playing the lead. So again, thank you so much for joining me today on Joy on Paper Live. You are a joy.
Thank you.
Okay, bye bye now. Bye. It was great to talk to C.I. Jerez about her book, At the Island's Edge. It's a wonderful book, very interesting, and I'm sure you will enjoy it. Please subscribe to Joy on Paper Live so that I can bring you more interviews with fascinating authors. All you have to do is click that button, subscribe, share, and comment.